So, should you main Asshimar in Gundam Evolution? Like we did before, I'm going to talk about this, and then I'm going to let you guys make your decision for yourself, but here it goes. So Asshimar is what I would describe as a ranged damage controller. It's a character that essentially controls the positioning and also the lives of the enemies, and it does this from range. Asshimar in particular does this from flying to high grounds, and then it has these beautiful sight lines that it shoots down on enemies and makes it so they just can't be in that area or they likely will die. Also, it uses its area of effect napalm to burn groups and just essentially control where they are. Asshimar uses a 3-round burst fire hit scan weapon that has a total of 21 shots, meaning you have 7 bursts. It fires at a moderate rate, so you do have a decent amount of time before you have to reload. The character has 1,000 hit points, and it has really good mobility. It has 2 dashes, and it has an excellent flight ability, so if you like mobility, you will probably like this character. Its G maneuver is a punch ability that it hits onto enemies and it damages and stuns them. It's very good for defending yourself, but it's not something that you can necessarily use to like carry a fight with, plan ahead to carry a fight with. So essentially, if you're looking to play this character, you're looking at something like similar to a combination of Ashe and Pharah from Overwatch. Pharah with the way that it can fly in the air and look down on enemies and hover there and shoot them, and Ashe from its like general aim and its general playstyle. So if you like the precision aiming, burning enemies from the sky, then make sure to check out Asshimar. Gosh, their names are so similar. All right, now it's time to talk about how good Asshimar is. So Asshimar is unfortunately pretty niche of a character. There's definitely areas in which you can do really well with it and get a lot of value, but in general, playing it, you're just going to feel like your character isn't really doing enough when it comes to damage. When you compare it to something like RX-78 and Pale Rider, you definitely notice this because they do a lot, and on Asshimar, you're just going to consistently feel like the number should have been made higher. It can deal 480 damage with a headshot and 240 without, which sounds really good because you can 3-shot kill the best character in the game, the highest HP character in the game, Sazabi. But realistically, since it's really hard to hit headshots consistently with a burst, you're looking at something like needing 4 of them to kill a 1,000 hit point hero. And on top of this, it has a pretty slow fire rate. So if you're in a 1v1 situation against a Pale Rider or an RX-78 Gundam, realistically, you shouldn't be expecting to win if they're equally skilled to you. So it is niche, as I've been saying, and there are good things about it. It is really good at playing on maps with a lot of high ground, and that's its like ideal strength, because not only can it access them easily with its fly ability, but it can also fly away from enemies when they jump onto them. So if it's sitting on a high ground, an enemy comes up onto it, it just flies away. And on top of this, it can fly up into the air, hover, and then it can shoot down from them from above. It's really fun to do, it's funny, but it's also just a really good ability. It's a good solid counter dive ability. On top of this, it has good area of effect damage. Not super high, but still enough that you could get enemies down into easy kill range if you hit a group solidly. Its ultimate is extra good for defending against something diving onto you, like I've been talking about, which still is Asshimar's biggest weakness overall. It allows you to essentially win a fight against something you shouldn't be able to win a fight against, like Sazabi, but the disadvantage of it is that it doesn't have a guaranteed ability to like win a fight like something like Barbatos's ultimate or Pale Rider's ultimate do if they're used properly. So yes, you do counter your weakness, but you can't use it as a reliable ultimate to like win something like a second point of a point capture situation, something where you really need something that can just kill all the enemies right away. It's not going to be Asshimar's ultimate punch. So in regards to skill requirement, it does require a pretty solid amount. Hitboxes are decently forgiving in Gundam Evolution, but a lot of Asshimar's strength does come from aim, specifically because it's a 3-shot burst. So if you aren't able to hit those 3-shot bursts consistently, you're going to struggle. Its napalm isn't hard to aim, so that's not an issue because it is area of effect and it explodes wherever it hits. However, it also does have a secondary fire ability, which is a rapid projectile. It's fast, but still a projectile. So you do have to swap your brain from hit scan aim over to projectile aim when you use it, which can be difficult. And for every projectile, you do have to learn the timing on it. Transform is weird to control, but not really like not difficult. And its G maneuver is not mechanically demanding as long as you just aim in the general region of where the enemy is when you use it. However, for game knowledge, there's a different story. Disproportionately in comparison to similar suits like RX-78 and Pale Rider that I keep mentioning, it requires good game knowledge to get good value on. So you do have to know a lot about it. Much of its skill comes from holding cooldowns for important time periods. So if you don't understand when and why you should be using those cooldowns, you're going to have some issues. If you use napalm too early, you're going to lose a lot of value. For example, if you throw it before like a group walks through the choke because you're just searching for damage, you're going to lose out on all the potential to get kills off of it. If you're using flight and being dove after because you don't know when you should not be using it and when you should be holding it to get jumped, to save yourself when you get jumped on, that's also an issue and you're going to lose a lot of value from it. So really what you need to do is you need to understand really well why you want to play Asshimar, because if you don't know why you want to use it, you're not going to be able to plan ahead for how to effectively take advantage of this. So you need to know why it's good in a group of enemies, how to play against group of enemies, know what the advantages of high ground control and like which ones you should take, and also knowing which angles you should take on the enemy when you're shooting at them, how to control these angles, which one you should take versus your other teammates, and important things like that. And if you don't have that, you're going to not get the greatest value overall. So moving on, will Asshimar get buffed or nerfed soon? So the good thing is that we could reasonably be expecting some buffs. It's not a promise. I don't really expect Asshimar to be substantially changed, but it should be getting some buffs overall. I do expect them to buff the napalm grenade. It currently does 425 damage, which is pretty low, especially in comparison to GM's detonator bomb, which does up to 900 to a single target. So there's a little bit of a disparity there, and I know it's easier to throw Asshimar's napalm grenade, so that's why it's weaker, but it could easily get buffed up to something like 600. Its damage overall is a bit on the low side, but I wouldn't really expect this to be changed. Like I said, just because something's niche doesn't mean it's bad. So it is niche, but that doesn't mean it needs to be changed. Essentially how the thought process goes. So I wouldn't really expect them to just go, oh, well, it's not good enough, let's change it. There are certain circumstances in which its medium to long range fits positions a lot better than a GM sniper having long range, or something like a Pale Rider having closer range. So while it could maybe get a slight buff to the damage, I don't really expect it. Now, how fun is it overall? I would say it was really fun when things are going well. So if you're using it in the perfect circumstance, you'll have a lot of fun. Something like, landing a big napalm grenade, hearing the ticking sound going off is really, really nice. Landing consecutive headshots on enemies is great. I really like the gun in Asshimar. I do have to say it was probably like my top 2 guns in the game. Just the way that like the bullets look like beams of light. It's really, really cool. You can do really, really fun things with it, playing it like an assassin, like flying up behind enemies, being directly on top of them, hitting them in the head a couple times, and dropping and finishing them is really, really fun to do too. Especially when you like combine it with like a napalm, throw it on top of them and they're burning, they have no idea what's happening, and you just finish them off. It's really, really fun. However, when things aren't ideal, which is going to be like a majority of the time, it's not that great. You will simply feel, as I mentioned before, the numbers just aren't really high enough, and it's just frustrating. It is frustrating to feel like you just don't, like you're losing, you're not getting enough value because of the way your character is designed rather than you not playing well enough. But really, in particular for this discussion of whether you should play it as like a main character, you're going to have some frustrations because you're not going to be able to just swap to your character when you want to like a panic swap or, a comfort swap essentially. When things aren't going well and you want to be able to swap to a character and reliably like pop off, you're not going to be able to do that in Asshimar because usually it's not going to be better than what you were playing. And it's usually not going to get as much value as what you were playing, even if it wasn't better than you are in Asshimar. So that's pretty frustrating. You'll want to play your character all the time because it's your main character, because it's what a main should be, right? But you'll slowly be pressured out of it, and it might be by you realizing that your character is not that great, slowly pressuring yourself out of it, or it might just be other people. Like people might literally tell you to swap. I definitely see Asshimar becoming a character that people have like a borderline irrational just dislike of, because it won't be as good, and if they feel like you're playing that character, they might think you're throwing, something like that. So obviously this will be a little bit further into the game, but it's important for a main discussion, and you might really honestly just get flamed for it. All right, guys. So for the final rating, though, we're going to give it a low B tier at high ranks and a C tier at low ranks because there is a disproportionate capability for it. It's generally just not the best choice ever, but it's not the worst choice ever. And there's extra reasons for why that I haven't talked about yet. So it's not a terrible choice regardless of its rating. That's why it only gets a C tier at low ranks and not like a D or F. But it gets a lot of value from skill sets that you develop as you improve as a player and get to a higher level. So things like understanding how to control off angles and how to use off angles and pushing the limits of flight abilities and such. So if you're a lower level player, you're not going to get as much value on that. As for advantages overall, it is really good for learning other mobile suits, and that's why it gets pushed up into a higher tier than it perhaps should be. It is really good for learning Pale Rider because similar hit scan aim, similar positioning overall. Same thing with RX-78 Gundam, and good for GM Sniper, also Turn A Gundam. So there's a lot that you can flex into and have a very similar skill set overall. Also, it disproportionately improves in strength as you improve. So that's really nice because the better you get at the game, the more value you get out of it. So that's really, really good. But the disadvantages outweigh these advantages. Ideal situations, the way Asshimar are limited, and there will usually just be a better mobile suit you're playing. So you might as well just be playing that character, right? It will either be a GM Sniper, Pale Rider, or RX-78. And while you will have learned how to play them, if it's not your main, you won't be as good as you could be on those characters. So, yeah. Its other biggest disadvantage is that it doesn't carry an ultimate that you can farm and then just impose your will in the game in a tough situation like something else. For example, Pale Rider has easily one of the best ultimates in the game for that purpose. When, your team's not doing hot, things aren't going great, you can just farm your ultimate, run on the flank, hit that, and just burn the whole team down. You can't do that with Asshimar, and that's gonna be a bit of a frustrating situation later on. If you're playing in a team, you're playing with buddies, like that, really the onus isn't on just you to do that. But if you're playing more solo duo, it's gonna be frustrating not to have that capability. Decided you want to play Asshimar? Then make sure to check out my mobile suit guide I made for it. I talk about the abilities, the strengths and weaknesses, how to play, and when to play. Thanks so much for watching, everyone.